Globalization. It's one of those words, promising connection, but, well, often stirring up controversy.
Definitely.
Today, we're really getting into Joseph Stiglitz's Globalization and its Discontents.
A really influential book.
And this isn't just theory, right? Stiglitz was inside the system, Nobel winner, former chief economist at the World Bank.
Yeah, that insider perspective is key. He saw it firsthand.
So our goal today is to unpack his critique of how globalization was managed, particularly for developing nations.
Right. And it's crucial, like you said, it's about the management, the way it was done, not necessarily saying globalization itself is inherently bad.
Got it. So let's start there. How does Stiglitz define globalization in this context?
Well, fundamentally, he talks about it as, taking down barriers to trade and integrating national economies more closely. Standard idea.
Okay.
But his big point is, while that could be amazing if it's mishandled, well, it can actually make poverty worse and create more instability.
Mishandled potential, then.
Right.
What does mishandled actually mean, according to him?
A core idea is that national governments need to be in the driver's seat. They need to manage globalization in a way that fits their specific situation. It's not a one-size-fits-all template.
Like the East Asia examples he brings up.
Exactly. He highlights how countries there often had success with export strategies, but they kept control over the pace of opening their economies. They didn't just follow external dictates blindly. National strategy was vital.
Okay, so that contrasts with the international institutions approach.
Precisely. It contrasts sharply with what became known as the Washington Consensus, this sort of free market ideology adopted by the big financial institutions, especially in the 80s and 90s.
Ah, the Washington Consensus.
Yeah.
Remind us, what were the main pillars of that?
Sure. It basically involved things like strict government budgets, fiscal austerity, selling off state-owned companies, so privatization, and really rapid market and trade liberalization. Open everything up quickly.
And Stiglitz's issue was?
His critique is pretty strong. He argues these policies were often pushed onto developing countries without enough thought for their unique circumstances, their stage of development,
And sometimes led to disaster.
That's his argument. He felt this sort of neoliberal approach, or market fundamentalism as he sometimes calls it, ended up prioritizing the interests of, developed countries and international finance over the actual needs of people in developing nations.
Let's dig into those institutions then. The IMF gets quite a bit of attention in the book, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Stiglitz is highly critical. He argues the IMF often imposed this standardized economic model everywhere, almost like a cookie cutter.
Without looking at the local reality.
Exactly, without enough regard for specific conditions. The shock therapy approach is a key example. He uses this idea of transitioning to a market economy almost overnight.
And the consequences.
Well, Stiglitz links this approach to worsening crises, like the Asian financial crisis in '97 and Argentina's economic collapse around 1998-2002. He also points to Russia's difficult transition and slow development in sub-Saharan Africa.
What specific policies drew the most fire?
Things like demanding really strict budget cuts, pushing for high interest rates, very rapid opening of trade, and, crucially, capital markets letting money flow freely in and out. Plus, this constant insistence on privatization.
And transparency issues, too.
Yes, that's another major theme. A perceived lack of transparency and accountability in how these decisions were made.
Okay, what about the World Bank? Stiglitz worked there. Does he see it differently from the IMF?
It's a bit different. Well, he acknowledges the bank also supported the Washington Consensus. His focus, perhaps because of his experience there, seems more on witnessing the effects of badly managed globalization on the poor. He saw the negative consequences up close.
And the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Similar critiques.
Yeah, similar themes pop up, lack of transparency again. He mentions trade disputes being settled in secret panels, essentially, with no real national appeal process. And also this perceived imbalance pressure on poor countries to slash their trade barriers while rich countries keep theirs, especially, things like agricultural subsidies.
Right. That farm subsidy issue is always contentious.
Definitely. Developed countries protecting their farmers while demanding developing nations cut support for their own industries.
You mentioned the Asian crisis. Can we quickly revisit that as an example?
Sure. Take Thailand. Stiglitz argues the IMF's prescription of high interest rates actually choked the economy further. Or Indonesia, where they forced bank closures without deposit insurance, causing widespread panic. It made things worse in his view.
And Russia's transition.
Yeah, the whole shock therapy approach there led to a massive economic decline in the 90s. He contrasts that with China or Poland, which took more gradual, state managed approaches and fared much better economically. I mean, by the late 90s, China's GDP was like double Russia's.
Wow. And Argentina followed IMF advice but still had huge unemployment. Kenya, too.
Yes, those are other examples he used to show the potential negative impacts, even bankruptcies in Kenya's case after IMF programs. He also warns these policies can fuel social unrest.
So given all this criticism, is Stiglitz saying we should just ditch these institutions, dismantle globalization?
Yeah, not at all. That's important. His focus is really on reform. He wants to reform the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, not abolish them.
How? What kind of reforms?
He argues for more gradual selective approaches, tailoring policies to countries, building institutions carefully, promoting more democracy both within countries and internationally, like giving developing nations a bigger vote in these global institutions.
And more transparency.
Absolutely. Greater transparency and accountability are central, and fundamentally restructuring the global financial system to make it more stable.
It really makes you think. Looking around today, do Stiglitz's concerns from, the early 2000s still feel relevant?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Are we still grappling with finding that right balance between global integration and local needs and control? Or have things shifted? Something to ponder, definitely.